is just as much for you as it is for the ladies. It's really important for all of us, men and women, to understand and respect each other's roles in the church, but also you might get asked some questions about, why women can't be priests, or what do women do in the church, and it's important for you to know. So, fellas, don't feel left out. Be excited about the topic, just like the women I know are excited about the topic. So last week we talked about the Ministerial Priesthood, and that's a role that's specific to certain called men in the church, but it's not a role that women are called to serve. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing their initial reaction, or just in general how they feel about that fact?
Fine. It's
Fine.
okay.
Fine. Yeah. Good. Yeah. I mean, it's good to be, open to serving in whatever way you're called. But sometimes women do tend to feel left out, or insignificant, or even a little bit persecuted for the fact that they can't serve in a ministerial priesthood. So those feelings are, they're valid feelings, because they come from a lot of times they come from a culture that misunderstands what authority is. And it's a really common issue. And so I just want to ask, does anybody have like an initial word or phrase that comes to mind when they hear the word authority?
Police.
Bully. Power.
Yeah. So you wouldn't necessarily be wrong. I mean, people use their authority in good ways, and they use their authority in bad ways. But it's also really important to understand what the actual real meaning of authority is, because I think that's when you start to recognize women's role in the church a little bit differently. So the initial use of the word authority comes from a Latin term, and it was really used in the context of God as the divine authority. And it also was not a word that was taken separately from responsibility. So it does mean you hold a place of honor. It does mean you hold certain power and dignity, but it's also the responsibility that comes along with that. You can't separate power and authority from responsibility. So when we think about it in the terms of, or in the context of God as the divine authority who grants us all our specific authorities and responsibilities, we start to see things a little bit differently. That doesn't mean it won't continue to be misused, and it doesn't mean it won't be distorted by the devil, because let's face it, the devil loves it when we're at each other's throats and divided. So you're always going to see issues with authority, but the truest form is pure and it's good. So feminism. I think feminism in its true form is beautiful, and so does the church. There's a secular view of feminism that actually pushes women to be more like men, to have everything the same as men, do everything the same as men. And is that really feminism?
Just equalness.
Right. It's just really kind of degrading to say, women, you're not good enough. You need to be exactly like a man to have value. And I don't think that's true feminism, and the church doesn't either. God created us male and female different. We're different. But we're equal in dignity and value. And so too are our roles in the church. Men have a role in the church. Women have a role in the church. They are different, but they are very much equal in value and necessity. So, complementarity, big word. It basically means we are meant to complement one another. You can't be a complement of one another without being different. So the good thing about our roles in the church is that they are different. One of the things that gets me thinking about this, and probably the most obvious way to explain it, is procreation. So both men and women are able to create life, but they can't do it without the other one. The other way is community. Think about Adam being alone in the garden. There was no community in the garden. Adam was just hanging out. He only had community when Eve was made, and Adam and Eve depended on one another for community. Think of Adam and males as the structure of the community, and women as the ones that were nurturing and growing and developing that community and serving its needs internally. So you can't have the structure without the care and the nurturing. You can't have the care and the nurturing if there's nothing there to nurture. So you see, we're dependent on one another and very much equal in value. You may ask yourself, well, why do we need community? Like what? So what? Men and women need each other for community. Cool. Why? Well, God is a community of 3 persons in one, and we are made in the image of God. So we are made for community. Even if it's a more limited form of community than what the Trinity is, just being our very nature made in the image of God is creates our need and necessity for community. Also, how does the church thrive without community? It doesn't. It would never grow. It would never have lasted 2 minutes without community. So very, very important. Some other notes on feminism that I think are really beautiful, and some of you may have pondered these before. Some of this might be a new perspective for you, but the church herself is actually described in feminine terms. The church is portrayed as a woman, the bride of Christ. That is the church. God chose a woman, Mary, obviously, to give birth, to nurture, and to take care of his only begotten Son. Jesus, the second person in the Trinity, chose to become the most vulnerable of beings and be cared for by a woman. Jesus directly revealed himself as the Messiah to a Samaritan woman at the well. The very first time he actually called himself the Messiah, he said it to a woman. Jesus appeared after his resurrection to who? Mary Magdalene, a woman. The first person he appeared to after his resurrection. He charged her with going and telling the others that Jesus had risen. Women have been used in the Bible and in church history and even today in the most magnificent ways to spread the message of Christ, to spread mission and community. So would the church and would God have done any of this if women did not hold immense value? Probably not. It probably all would have been men. It would have been done by all men, and women would have just been, kind of there, present. But women are called to serve very, very actively in the mission of the church. So, women in the church's history. I've thought a lot about this. There are women in my life who are amazing women. They're not called to the religious life, and they're unable to have children. So they've struggled a lot. What is my role in the church? What am I supposed to do? Like, I can't have babies and raise Catholic children, and I'm not called to be a religious sister or a nun. They actually are married. And that's okay. There are so many women in the church, and there will be many, many more women in the church who aren't called to either one of these things. And we have some wonderful saints, just magnificent women who were neither. And so I just want to bring those up, just a few examples. I want to bring those up because I think it's really important. We hear a lot about motherhood, and we hear a lot about being a religious sister or a nun. And a lot of these magnificent saints are that, and that's wonderful. But just consider St. Joan of Arc. She's devoutly religious. a very fierce fighter and a liberator of France from the English during the 100 Years' War. She had mystic visions, and she was instructed in those visions to help liberate France. And she did until she was captured, but amazing saint. Not married, not a religious sister, and no children. Saint Veronica, there's not a mention of a husband or children in the Bible where she wipes Jesus' face as he's being led to his crucifixion. But a very great saint, a very brave woman, and someone taking care of the very person that instituted our church. Mary Magdalene, no husband or children mentioned. She predated religious orders, but she did minister in very similar ways to what religious sisters do. So I don't want to put that down, but she took care of the apostles as they went out and did their mission. Jesus and the apostles, she was there with them, walking with them, ministering to their needs, taking care of that community. Beautiful. They wouldn't have been able to do what they did without her because they needed her care. Saint Dymphna. Raise your hand if you've heard of Saint Dymphna. Awesome. If you have not, you should learn about her. She's actually the patron saint of people with anxiety, depression, mental illness. But she was a fabulous missionary in Belgium. Her mission is still going on today. It's been continued. But she was not married and did not have children, and she was not a consecrated woman. She was not a religious sister or nun. So a very important woman to learn about in the church. She's just remarkable. Chiara Bondano is a relatively new. She's beatified. She's not. She's actually not canonized yet. But the young woman was 19 when she passed away. But the years of her life were remarkable. I mean, if you go on the website that's promoting her canonization, the stories that her parents tell of her are amazing. She brought joy and the love of Christ to everyone she met. She was a 4-year-old dividing up her toys to give away to kids. She didn't want to give the kids her used toys. She wanted to give the kids her new, bright, shiny toys. Just one example. But you see, there's so many different ways that we're called to live holiness and to serve the church, and it doesn't have to be one way or the other. Another thing that I did not realize until I sat down to give this talk is that St. John Paul II wrote a beautiful letter to women. He wanted the world to know how valuable women are to the church. He also wanted women to know that the various circumstances of their life do not dictate the dignity or value, do not dictate the level of responsibility they hold. That they are just as valuable as, a domestic woman who is a stay-at-home mom and a wife and taking care of the house and the kids, just as much as a single woman or a widow, or, as I mentioned before, a woman in a sterile marriage, a religious sister, obviously, or an invalid, or a woman that's wheelchair-bound. All women have a very important role to play in the church. And he gave thanks for those women. The very, very different circumstances are no less valuable. So, a woman's role is fundamental wherever there is a human relationship. And our church is a relationship. It is a relationship. It's a relationship with each other as the members of the body of Christ. It's a relationship with Jesus. And women are endowed with an innate ability to sense the needs of others and respond to those needs. Not that men can't. Men do. Often they do. But it's something that they must practice, and it's a lot of times what they learn from their mothers or another woman figure in their life that taught them those skills. Not dig on men. Men, you're wonderful. But women are given these by God as gifts to use for relationship. And you can't have a church, you can't have a home, You can't have any community, work life. You can't have any of that without relationship. It's absolutely necessary. And it's a woman's job to make sure that those relationships are thriving. So I'll leave you with the why, because a lot of times we get the question why a lot as Catholics. Why can't women be priests? Why aren't women ordained? Why not? Why not? Why not? That's a very deep and complex topic. And it's probably one we could dive into, but it would take a whole series. So I'm just going to boil it down to like just bare bones basics of the priest's primary role, the very critical role that the priest plays that a woman cannot is to stand in persona Christi, to be an image of Christ on earth and make sacrifices at the Mass in the Eucharist. So this is done on behalf of the church. Women are not able to make these sacrifices because we are not able to stand in the person of Christ. But what we are called to do is receive this sacrificial love that Jesus gives us through his priests, and then spread and nurture that love across the church. So think of men as the doers of the sacrifice. The priests are the doers of the sacrifice, but we are called to receive and then spread that love from that sacrifice to everyone. Pretty awesome. I mean, it really is if you think about it. So I just want what I want you to come away with from this is that feminism in the church is real, and it's the most beautiful form of feminism there is. You don't have to believe that women and men must be the same. In fact, you shouldn't. You should value your differences and respect that in one another, and then lift each other up in your roles. Just lift each other up in your roles, and thank God for the other, because we really couldn't do it without each other. So